I know, and maybe you guys can help me feel a little comfortable if I start messing up. Not yet, but it was a question and answer deal, and it was a little easier. There's a few things I want to talk about. I know there's a lot of people out here that's been spoon plugging for a long time, and some of them not for very long. But there's things you have to do to be successful in your fishing. And first thing you have to do is believe whatever this man says over here is to be a fact. Because everything in that green book is a fact. And that man's worked long and hard to give us the information that we got. And you have to believe in it. And like I say, it's gonna be hard. One of the most important things in your fishing is watercolor. That is the most important thing that you can do to become a successful spoon plugger. You got this lake out here. You got Mona Lake over here. You got Hess Lake east a little bit. There's some others, but you gotta fish lakes with watercolor. That's the most important key in being successful in your fishing. You got shallower fish. You got shallower break lines. Most of the time, you got harder bottoms. It's a lot easier to work. Cleaner bottoms. Clear lakes, you got moss all over the place on the bottoms. You got weeds 15 to 20 foot. It makes everything you do so much more difficult. Guys, for 15 years, I didn't believe that. It wasn't that I didn't believe it, I didn't understand it, how important it was to listen to what Buck has to say. And it just made so much difference in my fishing dark water. You go out here and beat your brains out, and you catch some northerns, you catch some nice fish, but over there on Mona, over there on Hess, you're going to have it so much easier. When the fish move, you're going to make a great catch. You're trolling a 15, 18 foot weed line out there, and you hit a big bass, a 5-pound bass. You go to the cast, and you can't throw a spoon plug out there, sink it to the bottom, and walk it all the way back to the boat because you got weeds down there. So you're limited to a jump type lure. The most fish you're going to catch is 6, 7, 8 fish. If you got a clean hard bottom lake, dark water, you can throw a spoon plug out there, I don't care, anywhere, and walk it from all the way out, all the way back up. You're going to catch the whole bunch of fish. If you got 2 guys in a boat, you catch all of them. Right, Chuck?
Possible.
Get a little help. Yeah. Weather conditions. The longer you fish, the more you'll be able to read the weather conditions. You get better in your fishing. You learn how the fish react to a cold front. After the passing of a cold front, the fish drop way down deep. Very inactive, hard to catch. Then after a few days of stable weather, things start looking better. You get some cloud cover coming in. You begin to learn through your fishing on what to expect. One thing about spoon plugging, Buck says you always start out in the shallows. Well, I guess you better start out in the shallows because you can't tell the fish where he's going to be. That's the biggest mistake you can make, is telling the fish where he's going to be. If you're on a lake that doesn't have any weeds on it, you start with a 500 and you cover some pretty good areas so you know that there's no fish there. Then you put on a 400 and you come back 4 to 6 feet, just like he says to do. All the way down as deep as you can work. And that's the way it works. I don't care what lake you're on. If you're on this lake and you're checking the weed line, you start out at if they go to 15 feet, you pick a lure that goes halfway down, 250, and you get up tight to the weeds and you check that first. Then you go to the base and you go to the next break line all the way down as deep as you can go. It don't matter what lake it is, you do the same thing. You go through the same motions on every lake. What else I got? I might have to get my notes out. I'm a little bit nervous.
All those words disappear quick, right?
Yeah, they do. But I got the...
You didn't come talking last night.
Well, it's different. It's different. Anytime somebody wants to jump in with a question, I'll be happy to answer it, and that'd make it easier for me.
You forgot the second most important thing, and we learned that this morning.
That might be the first.
Yeah, it could be the first. That's put your drain plug in your boat.
Before you launch it.
Depends on who it is. That may and may not be important.
When you go fishing, you want to get on the water early, 7, 8 o'clock. And you want to be on the water when the fish move. If you're on the in your truck going from lake to lake, you're not going to make contact with a fish. You pick the lake you want to be on, make it a good one, you stay there all day until the fish move. If you get on the water early and you don't catch any fish before 10 o'clock, then never leave the water between 10 and 2. Because the fish are probably going to move between 10 and 2. If you hit them early in the morning, like 8 o'clock, you can expect it to happen again in the afternoon. I know you've heard it 100,000 times before. I'm sure there's nothing that I can say that you haven't heard before. But the new people, you got to believe what Buck says. I mean, everything that he says is absolute fact. And he repeats himself, and he repeats himself, and he repeats himself, and he does it for a reason. Guys that think they can go to the clear lakes and whoop them, they can't do it. You can't whoop them. With wire, you can catch some fish, but you can't whoop them. You can do a lot better on a dark watercolor lake. You got to go out there, and you got to start, like I said, and you got to stay with it all day long. You can't vary from it. You can't put on a night crawler and drag it around. You can't do that and become a good spoon plugger. You have to stick with the basics and just go with it, or it'll take you 20 years to. You may not ever understand. You may not ever be a good spoon plugger, and that's important. People just don't listen. I don't know why they don't listen. I'm glad that everybody's not a spoon plugger because there wouldn't be many fish.
Why do you think you catch fish when other people don't?
Because I stay out there all the time. I don't give up. And I follow Buck's guidelines.
How do you stay out there?
Because I know what can happen. I know what it's like to get into a school of big bass, anchored. And there's no feeling like it. There's no feeling like it.
How did you do it in Pickwick when everybody else was there?
We did the same thing. We started out in the shallows. After about 5 miles of not catching any fish, we figured there wasn't any fish in the shallows. So we started going deeper and deeper and deeper. And we used the features as our guidelines on where to fish until we located a fish.
Where was everybody when you came in with your fish?
Sitting in the underneath the pavilion. But you saw yourself that day, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
But I'm sure I'll slow down. But at the time, I got an awful good wife that keeps me going. Awful good.
Bunch of worms on.
There's so many people that don't listen, and I just don't understand why. I mean, it's all the answers are right there in the green book. Almost all the answers. I read an article back in 1977 in Fishing Facts a couple weeks ago, and Tom Dixon and Tom Ferencek or Ferencek, whatever his name was in there. Buck wrote this article, and it's been 18 years since he wrote that, and the words haven't changed a bit. I mean, they're absolutely the same as they are now. And it just amazes me to see people out here doing the wrong things. I had a guy this morning tell me that on the lake that we were on, we messed up and we picked a little bit. We thought the lake had watercolor. It did last time we were there. He said the fish are in the weeds.
He watches a lot of TV.
there's things that when you're out there screwing around, you're wasting time. And it is a lot of hard work, but to me, it's not a lot. It's not work. It's fun because I know what it can do. You know, it's satisfaction that you get out of it is nothing. It's like nothing else in this world. If I couldn't spoon plug, I don't think I'd want to be here. I mean, alive.
What do you think speed has to do with fishing?
Well, you constantly have to check your depths and your speeds constantly.
Switch your speeds a lot.
Constantly.
Don't you make him? Come on, pick it up.
Legitimately, has it helped you because you've been down to Pickwick, you've been around the other spoon pluggers? I mean, this is plug.
Absolutely. Years ago, we had nobody to ask any questions to. I got about 5 letters that I wrote Buck in a period of about 15 years, and he answered every letter that I ever wrote. And I thank you for that. And most of it back then was due to watercolor and not going deep enough and not checking your speeds. You got so much help now that you never had before. Absolutely, I've become a better spoon plugger because being around guys like you. Because you made me think.
Well, the northern boys make us think too. I mean, quite honestly.
Well,
it's a mutual thing. You get it back and forth. But you're all fishing you fish a different way than we fish, and yet you're fishing the same way, but it's a different attitude, you know, with it. But legitimately, being around the northern people, we started thinking deeper, and I think y'all started thinking faster.
we all use the same guidelines though.
That's true.
We use structure, breaks and break lines, and we use spoon plugs as our tools to do the job.
John, would you discuss stain water as a color as compared to, quote, watercolor?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Around here we have yellow greens, not too many white sandies, hardly any, and clear.
Oh, okay, clear but stained.
You talking about cypress?
Well, yeah, but or muskeg if you get
Brown?
farther north. Yeah.
Cypress color?
Yeah.
That's not too good. That's equal or worse than clear water.
Yeah, your lure will disappear at a foot and a half.
But it's still, right there in Buck's book, it says that he puts clear water better than cypress. Years ago, he had it the other way around, but now he puts clear water as being better than cypress because now you got wire line to go fish clear water. We have a couple of cypress watercolor lakes where we live. As a matter of fact, Jim Biddiner and I was on one last week, and we caught 3 nice muskies, but we caught 2 little bass about that big. I might fish a cypress colored water if it's got a good northern pike population. And in the case of the lake by me, it does have a great northern pike population, but I wouldn't go there to fish for bass. It's too inconsistent fishing. Just like clear water, it's too tough. When you have darker water lakes close by, always pick the darker water lakes. Your success is going to come quicker, and that's it. That's the #1 reason for it.
And why do you prefer to fish for bass?
It doesn't really matter to me what I catch, but I enjoy getting into the school. I mean, that's the greatest thing in the world, getting into the school. That's when you get your diploma, as Buck says. And if you haven't gotten into the school, it's the most fantastic, rewarding thing there is in this world. Every cast, throw a spoon plug out, let it sink down, and reel it in, and big bass, every cast. What is better? Catching pike's good, but doing that is the most rewarding thing.
How do you find with a lake that's got muskie, that's got pike, got bass, the relationship of movement? Will bass move at a different time? What the muskie or the pike do, or if the muskie are up moving, or the pike hide?
It doesn't matter to me. Right?
No, I mean, what do you find? Well, I'm curious of when you're out there, do they move at different times? Are there different movement periods? In other words, do the bass move at 10 o'clock and then the muskies move at 12?
It's happened. It's happened.
But do they move all at one time every once in a while?
Usually when we're hitting the northerns like crazy, the bass usually aren't around.
Or not around?
Or not around. I don't know if it's because the weather conditions aren't conducive for largemouth or what.
Can you blame him, John?
Last year on Hess Lake. No, I don't blame him. Last year on Hess Lake when we made our catch over there, we caught no northerns at all. We was wondering whether it had any in it. And Jim caught 30 or 40 the other day out of there.
So you think it is separate?
And one bass.
You think it's separate movement?
It may be. I have found on some of the good lakes with good populations of northerns that the northerns may be on the best spot and the bass may be over here on the other spot.
But they might become active
At the same time.
You're not there at both places, so you don't.
That's right.
How about with muskie? When the muskie move, I mean, there's number one predator. When the muskie are moving, are the bass hiding, or are the bass moving too?
I think when they all get active at the same time. They may use different locations, but
When y'all go out as a club, you've got 6, 7, 8 of you fishing. You're fishing different points. So some of them come in at the same time, and the bass caught them at say 10 o'clock, and then some are catching pike at 10 o'clock.
most of the guys, when they make a catch, usually it's about the same time. I've been on different lakes when Chuck's been on other lakes, and we compare catches, and the first thing we do is say, when did you hit them? And it's almost very, very close.
What about on the same lake when it's on, in other words, you've got, let's say there's 3 bars and you've got a boat on each bar and they all move at 10 o'clock. Do the bass move on one bar and the pike move on one bar and the muskie move on another? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that.
We don't have enough experience in that happening to give a good idea. Although the pike and the bass we have a little experience on. As far as having musky pike and bass at the same time, it's a rare.
I would think that's very interesting though. I mean, if you know, if y'all get together and you do that,
We don't have that many getting to us either.
you ought to have more.
Usually it's the same people that show up.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you compare notes, I'd be really interested in knowing that, because I'd like to know that relationship in there. See, I've asked Mr. Perry that before, but when you're one person that's there, you can't, you know, it takes a group of you, grouping and working as a group to get it
How
done.
do the stripers and the bass compare?
Can't answer that because when there's a group of us out there, we're all fishing for stripers out in the area where the stripers are, and the bass are on the other side of the deltas. Okay, let me explain something. In like at Watts Bar Lake, you've got a 60-foot delta. You've got a delta that comes up, has a break line at 28 feet, then it comes to 25 feet on top, and then it goes down to about 35 on the other side before you hit the shoreline. That delta can be 1,000 yards wide. So the bass are on the backside, and the stripers are out here in the channel, and that's in the green book, by the way. I mean, that's that association. So when we're all out there fishing, everybody's kind of fishing for the stripers, and then the guys that are up the lake, that are where the bass congregate a little bit more, staying away from those big fish, well then they move at about the same time, it seems like. But I don't have good verification. I'm sorry.
The fellas in our club that are doing things right. One guy could be on one end of the lake and the other fellow on the other end of the lake, and they're catching fish at the same time. They start at the same time, they end at the same time.
Different type of fish, too.
All different kind of fish. And that's all. It is interesting, but I don't look at it too much because I don't care. You know, I'm fishing structure, breaks and break lines, and I fish the same way regardless. It's something I can't control, so I don't worry about it.
John, have you caught a mixed bag off the same point at the, at that period of time that they were hitting?
Sure.
I mean, you picked up northerns, you picked up smallmouth off the same point,
Sure.
out of the same movement.
Sure.
I mean, they're separate fish. I'm sure they school different. But
Sure we have. We've caught different species of fish on the same spot.
I mean that particular movement. Though.
Right.
Okay.
At the same time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Isn't that what the Green Book says, though, that when fish become active in a lake, they all become
move
active at the
same
time?
time? Yeah. This morning we made a mistake by going to Stony Lake, and we also made a mistake by leaving the water between 10 and 2 because we didn't catch much, but we couldn't take it anymore. We got to Mona over here, and about 5 minutes after we were in the water, we was catching some fish. And we lasted about 2 hours after that. We was just about ready to quit. and then the fish really moved. And right during that rainstorm, I caught an 11-pounder and I snagged him in the tail. And Deb was putting my rain jacket on while I was fighting that fish. But if what keeps me going and what keeps me out there is catching the fish. I mean, just being able to go somewhere that you've never been to before. For instance, Makatawa. A couple weeks ago I fished it on a cold front day, and the day we was on it was a bluebird skies when you was with me, Chase. And we fished it exactly like we fish any other body of water there is. We started in the shallows, we worked it out, each break line out. We didn't go too deep because we was more or less straggler fishing in 8 to 10 foot depth. We could have went out and spent some time in the channel, but I would rather caught some stragglers.
Isn't what keeps you on the water when everybody else leaves the water the fact that maybe you may get that school of fish, and everybody else leaves the water thinking, well, maybe I'm not going to get that school of fish.
I always think I'm going to get that school of fish.
That's what keeps you on the water.
I always think I do. If I don't, that's okay. There'll be a time. It's been a long time since I got into an anchoring position and caught a school of bass. But it doesn't matter that the school I caught last year keep me going for a long time. But you have to strive for that every time out. Every time out. The weather conditions don't allow for that to happen all the time. Maybe only happen once a year, man. You're lucky it happens once in a lifetime. But that's what keeps me going.
John, if you fish from the shallows to the deep, you don't catch a fish, what do?
Repeat. That's one thing about it. If you check the shallows and you get nothing, and you go out all the way down and you get nothing, and you keep doing that, all of a sudden a little later you go back to the shallows, you start catching little stinkers in the shallows. You can bet you that there's a movement going on, and the fish are at a reachable depth, the adult size fish. That's another thing. Fish about this big, that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for the fish out here underneath the piers. We're looking for the adult size fish, and that's what the spoon pluggers look for. No matter what species, we want the adult size fish. We want the most and the biggest, and that's what it's all about.
Yesterday, towards the end of the day, you were fishing the 8 to 10 foot range. You were trolling that. What was the purpose of that versus
on Makatawa? Just a straggler fish. 8 to 10 foot depth is always good. A good depth to straggler fish.
Is that because the movement was already over what little movement there was? You're hoping there were some fish just hanging around?
Right. I was hoping to catch some stragglers, and that's all. If you're trolling 8 to 10 foot depth and there's a movement going on, you'll be aware of it. Buck says it's always a good depth to troll.
What is the deepest fish you'll be able to work?
How deep will I work? As deep as there's structure.
So around most of the lakes you got around here, what is your plan?
That's a good question. Out here, you got some good break lines out there, 40 feet, maybe deeper. No, I was not to fish this lake.
What did you do in Mona?
In Mona, we went down, today we checked down to about 12 feet. And then we went back and repeated in the shallows.
How deep is Mona?
Mona is the section we fish is a little over 20 feet deep.
Why didn't you check on that?
We could have checked down. There's a hard soft bottom break line about 17 feet, 16 to 17 feet. That's where it goes from hard to soft. And we could have went out there and checked. But I wanted Deb to catch some fish. I wanted my wife to catch some fish. Sometimes you get out there and you're not successful right away. It takes time. It takes effort and a lot of time to work that stuff out. You do that on lakes that are close to your home. Where you have time, yeah. Time, in things like this, time is important. You want to go out and you want to catch as many fish as you can. So we search for the easiest ones to catch. It's like when we go down to Pickwick.
Well, you don't look at the easiest ones to catch there.
Well, it's easier down there.
Don't kid me. I know where you were bouncing that spoon plug around and it wasn't in 12 feet of water.
We just want your fish, Frank.
And there was catchable fish in 12 feet of water, but you wasn't there.
Where were you there? He also said he liked the adult side.
Yeah, I know.
Where was
There
he?
was a correlation.
Where was he in Pickwick?
Sir?
Where was he in Pickwick?
Well, it's in the deepest water available for that area. He was right on the very bottom, right where the, it was what, 22, 23
22 feet in the bottom of the channel.
Yeah.
And we caught the fish on a 21-foot break line where it dropped 1 foot into the channel. But we only did that, we only had to fish that because, first of all, I knew the area was productive. From the last time I was there, I knew that there were some good fish caught in the area. So we stuck with it. We checked the shallows, there was nothing, and we just kept working out and out and out and out until we caught the fish.
There's about a 1 foot channel break line. Most of the time at Pickwick, there's about a 1 foot channel break line. And if you'll stay on that 1 foot, I mean, it's going to lead you to the deepest water that there is, whether it's 5 miles downstream or 4 miles downstream. But he found the one spot that was there where there was, actually it's an old road bed that's there from where wagon road beds. And it's, we're used to seeing them down there. You're not used to seeing them here, but there was a wagon road bed where they go to cross the river. And that's where he caught his fish. And several people have caught him here since, too. I mean, it's well known now. It's documented, you know. The next morning, it looked like a swarm of bees down there.
If you go through Buck's guidelines that he set up, you'll locate the fish. If you start out in the shallows, just work your way out, check your depths and your speeds, you will locate the fish. The mechanical part of it is nothing difficult. The mental part of it's difficult. Staying out there doing it sometimes. It's tough.
Usually the contact point below 10 or 12 feet.
Usually, yeah.
Do you locate your breaks mostly by trolling with spoon plugs or with sonar?
You can do both. Sometimes they're hard to see. Sometimes you can't see them with sonar. Usually the ones that are like that are the ones after the base break line where it peters out, flattens out. Those are harder to see because they're silted in.
So it's deeper, they show up better on sonar than shallow. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that.
Oh, you're not saying that.
I'm saying the ones that are silted in are the ones that are hard to see. One that breaks from 10 to 20 foot is easy to see. It's the ones that are down there that are a little bit silted in, that the more gradual ones is harder to see.
I'll lay $1 to donut if you find a contact point with your lure, and you might confirm it later with your sonar. But I bet you won't find a contact point with your sonar. I mean, if that makes any sense. You'll find it catching the fish, and then later on you'll see it on your sonar. You'll say, yeah, I can see why they're doing this.
If you check your depths and your speeds constantly, you'll find it. Your lure will find it. Everybody thinks there's so much to spoon plug. Everybody thinks just because this guy or this guy or this guy goes out there and catches a bunch of fish that he's some kind of expert. Well, there's no such thing as an expert. The guy that catches the fish is the guy that goes out there and does things right. And the guy that stays out there and does things right, he eventually is going to run into some fish. The guy that quits and goes out there and does something else is the guy that's going to be left out in the cold when the fish move. You got to stick with it, man. You got to put your heart into it.
John, how do you locate dark water lakes? What do you look for in a lake?
One that, if you drop your lure in the water, it disappears within about a foot or so. That's a pretty good one. To give you an example of how many dark lakes we have in our area, we got a map book about this thick. It's got 268 lakes in it. Out of those 268 lakes, 21 of them have color. So you have to search, you have to look and find them yourself. Most of them are clear. But you find a dark one, you better fish it. It's got fish in it and it's the best.
Join club or start a club, and you got 15, 20 other people that tell you where these lakes are.
That's right. That's right. The best thing about spoon plugging is you guys right out here. All you people are the best thing that ever happened to spoon plugging. Because back then when I started, I didn't have nobody. I had Chuck, wherever he is.
I'm out here.
I had Chuck, and I had Danny, and I had Buck to write a letter to when I got in trouble. And now I got everybody to ask. You know, we all share our knowledge together, and that makes us all better.
Yeah.
How important is watercolor in relation to the weather we have in Michigan?
Very important. The most important thing you can do when you're fishing. Look today.
I wonder where he went.
You know, how many fish do you catch today? 6 or 8 fish. We probably caught. How many we catch, Deb? I don't want to lie.
Bunch.
How many?
15.
15 or 20. Did anybody fish this lake today? Nobody will admit it. How many fish did you catch today?
One.
One.
How many did you catch today?
15 or 20.
Your head.
I attribute that to watercolor.
But I got out there late this morning, John. The movement was 2/3 of the way through when I hit there, and there's Dodge, and I realized that.
No excuse. No excuse, Dennis.
I got there late.
No excuse.
Ain't nothing moved. I was just pulled in. I seen the
If you just read Buck Perry's book and you just do what he says to do and you do it right, you do it by the book, you will be a successful spoon plugger.
John, would you rather fish a lake that had a 2-foot weed line or a lake that had a nice weed line, so about 8 to 10 worth of break line? Where it broke off at that 8 to 10.
All things being equal, I'd rather pick a lake with a 2-foot weed. I would fish a lake that had 8 to 10-foot weeds.
Isn't that like, I always have better luck on the 8 to 10 foot because the cold front goes through. A lot of times fish would be pulled up in the weeds so far. Day 1, you would do as good as you would on day 3 because that outside weed line being a break line.
If those fish become active, if there are any fish in the weeds, when they become active, they'll move to the outside edge of the weeds. Any fish that becomes active in the deep water, they'll do the same thing. So your presentation of lures will locate those fish no matter what. It doesn't matter to me if the fish are in the weeds. You know, you're going to fish the same way regardless. You know, there's a lot of questions that don't have to be answered in the spoon plugging. You know, you can think about what these fish might be doing. These pros on TV, they say, you know, the fish do this, the fish do that. How in the heck would they know? You know? How would they know? I don't understand some of the things they say. We have guidelines to go by, and that's all we need. That's all we need, depth and speed. There ain't nothing else.
You ever notice that the fish are dead turn right off when you got an 8-foot weed line? You can go through there just picking those weeds as slow as you can go, and if they're turned off, you'll still pick up fish right on there. Whereas if you only had a 2-foot weed line, chances are instead of turning off and laying at the weed line, they would go back deep. Where the other ones, a lot of them don't go back deep. That gives them some cover or something to hang around in. You know, pick up stragglers.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
Well, you get used to weeds, you know, to go to a lake where there's no weeds, you kind of miss it a little bit.
I know, but you still got to do everything the same, John. You know?
I could get used to a lake without weeds real quick.
I could too. I could too.
Oh God, every one of y'all gonna move to Tennessee.
I will bring weeds down.
I told you we kept making a mistake by not taking Tennessee when we had the chance.
Do you ever look at the 8 to 10 foot weed line as maybe saving you a lot of time in the search of the fish instead of a lake that has a 2-foot weed line? Do you ever get it in that respect?
saving me time.
Yeah, you don't have that 2 to 8 to 10 cover with the weed line is 8 to 10 to start. Follow what I'm saying?
Start deeper.
If you go to a lake that's got a 2-foot weed line, you're gonna start working there and work deeper.
Correct. Correct.
But if you go to a lake that's got an 8 to 10 foot weed line, you're gonna start there and work deeper.
I used to fish a lake called Hamilton Lake.
Yeah,
And this lake has got at that time had about a 13, 14 foot weed line. And it came up pretty good and it had weeds all over the flats, almost all the way to the bank. When Buck said fish the shallow, start out with 500, I wrote him a letter one time. And this lake was loaded full of fish. I mean, it was the best pike lake in the world. And I wrote Buck a letter and I said, I can't troll the shallows, Buck, so get the hell off of it. So